Good morning. My name is Fred Smith. I'm going to be the moderator of a very exciting panel. I'm an executive vice president with Uniworld Group Global. And today I'm going to be asking some questions of some very distinguished guests. And so let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you guys arrived at where you are today and your roles with ProMedica. So we're going to take a couple of minutes and address this. This is kind of the intro for everyone. So we'll go with Les and then we'll work our way around.
All right. So as you mentioned, Les Thompson, I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer here at ProMedica. And I've been here just under 2 years. And in terms of how I got to ProMedica, it's really been a journey for me. I've been in a variety of industries and a variety of roles, both in HR and in operations throughout the various businesses. I also like to think of being here at ProMedica in terms of when I found the company and heard about the opportunity, it was one of those where the mission really touched me. The vision I could really relate to. And as I think about my purpose, it really fit in with the way that I like to help people, whether in or outside the organization, also the communities, and just all around what fulfills me myself. So that's how I ended up here.
Thank you so much. Now let's go to Mr. Braylock, and then we'll do Randy last, if that's okay.
Right. Greg Braylock Jr. I am our Vice President and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer here at ProMedica. I've been here almost 8 years. So have spent most of my time prior to starting in this role about 6 months ago. Most of my time was in our hospital operations, acute care providers world, where I served as one of our hospital administrators and executives at a few of our community hospitals, but also one of our tertiary care centers. Prior to that, I was in the social sector, worked for United Way, and my actual background is in middle childhood education. So kind of navigated the realms of education, social sector, and healthcare.
Okay, and now Randy, love for you to kind of bring this all together and go right ahead, please.
Sure. Randy Oster, I'm the president and CEO of ProMedica. I've actually been at ProMedica over 24 years and almost 12 years as the CEO. Started working in healthcare in 1977, so about 40 plus years, mostly in the Midwest, as far south as the St. Louis area. And, I've been in healthcare in a variety of fashions, spent a variety of years working in the public health, our public health hospitals, public Indian reservations. And so, been at ProMedica. We're a health and well-being company. And so we do a lot of things, not only in thinking about people clinically, but also the things that we're going to talk about today that really kind of gets to a person's overall health and well-being.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much for those intros. Now, the next question is going to be for Randy and Les. I'd love to hear about the DE&I journey at ProMedica. So if you could talk a little bit about how and what caused the DEI initiative to get started at ProMedica, I think everyone would be interested in hearing about
that. Randy, you like to go? You shepherd this during your time that I could pick up from my time.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So it's interesting. So prior to Les's arrival and with Les's recruitment, one of the things that we had identified is really the need to focus more on D&I. And we had actually 2 previous leaders over our history at ProMedica, and it had been a few years. One of our last leader moved on. I think what was interesting is a lot of our work over the last decade has really been focused on things outside of our walls, like the social determinants of health. We moved to about 4,000 employees into the city of Toledo, and one of the things that struck us was we can do nice things in downtowns, but we also needed to do a lot of neighborhood work. And so between our social determinant work, this work that we call anchor institution work, organizations that are anchored in place, make investments in their community, it was very logical that, we began to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and actually, especially as we did our neighborhood work. So that led to kind of a refocus on it. And then, of course, as we know, the world changed radically, over the last year by events and, of course, the pandemic. And that really kind of brought us to a refocus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But not only that, I think it just, we kind of realized we had to think about it in completely different ways. So, it's been a journey. And I think what's happened is we pivoted over the last year to rethink our approach and moving away from probably a more traditional type of approach to really think more about racism and really kind of examining ourselves and where we needed to go.
All right, super. Les?
Yeah, so my journey with ProMedica, DE&I really started when I was in the interview process. And I remember sitting down with Randy, and that was one of the core items that we spoke about. And he actually shared with me what his vision was in regards to DE&I for the company. So that was something that helped attract me because it's something that I'm very passionate about. And then once I arrived, I went on what I called my listening and learning tour, sitting down with groups of employees and round tables at all levels in the organization, and really started to think about and shape all various elements of human resources, including efforts around DE&I. So we built the HR strategy aligned to the company strategy, and we knew that we really had to build that DE&I strategy. And the first thing was to hire someone that in this role was a key hire to drive this initiative. And that's where Greg Braylock Jr. comes in for that role. And the rest has been a journey for us.
Okay. Thank you again for that. Now that brings me to, apparently, Greg, these two gentlemen convinced you that this was the right thing to do. So if you could talk to us a little bit about why you became so interested in being the CDO at ProMedica, and if there's any nuggets in there where you can tell us any insights that they told you in convincing you, I'd love to hear those.
Yeah, I think it's just timing. As I said, my background is both in healthcare and in the social sector and education sector. And so, all of these sectors are about providing high quality something. And all of these sectors also have a fair amount of disparities in them. And so, even as a hospital administrator, I loved our mission. I loved the work that we do, our teams. You also pay attention to, are there certain populations in our care that are experiencing things differently than others, and how can I rectify that? And so, this year, or 2020, was really, I think, a reflecting point for many of us. And I looked at what we were trying to accomplish as an organization, where our mission was, and, how we were trying to grow the organization. And I felt like, I could add value in a way that wasn't being added to our organization at the time, and helping us to lead the efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I had a conversation with Les to talk to him about it and just kind of see where his thoughts were, because we had, some things in motion as he talked about already. And honestly, I had some reservations for it. A lot of my mentors and just people that I know that work in different industries in similar roles around diversity, I hadn't seen the kind of commitment from organizations into those kinds of roles or in that work. As well, sometimes people go into these roles and it stifles their career growth. And so, I had a pretty frank conversation with both Les and Randy to really understand our commitment to it and their vision. And it truly aligned with everything I was thinking and everything we could accomplish as an organization. So it's really more about how I feel I can add value to the organization, how I felt like I could help us to really begin to lift this work off the ground and move us forward.
Thank you. I love the balance in terms of the balance that the three of you struck in coming together and really driving DEI at ProMedica. So kind of leads me to the next question is, it's obvious that DEI is an imperative at ProMedica. And I'd love to hear and I'd like to start with Randy on this one. I'd love to hear, why is DEI such an imperative for ProMedica?
I think we mentioned it a little bit ago. Over the last decade, we started with doing some work in hunger about a decade ago. And what it led us to do was to understand more about the social determinants of health. So we screen patients for the 10 social determinants of health and our employees. And so we've been working with employers. And what we realized is that when we look at our individual health and well-being, 20% of it really has to do with healthcare. And the rest of it all has to do largely with behavior and social factors. And so as a system, again, it makes no sense just to think about a person clinically. You need to think about people holistically. And so it really, as we look at our journey, it was really about what was social determinants focus. And then more recently, personal determinants, which has a lot to do with resiliency and having a life purpose and those things. But again, I think over the last year, these the way the world changed and the discussions, racism was not part of that thinking before. And I think when you look in the past of our country, it was talked about. It's a word that gets pressed, but I think it was really largely misunderstood. And I think it was just the dialogues that we've had over the last year, different dialogues than we've ever had before. You kind of always have the assumption that everybody has the same opportunity in life, that they have the same opportunity to navigate barriers. But I think it's really hard for people that have not been, subject to racism to understand it. And I think when we think about what we do, we're a health and well-being organization. We take care of people. And no matter who they are, no matter what they do, no matter who walks through our doors. And if we want to uplift communities and neighborhoods, the whole DEI initiative is critical. And it's interesting that it took the last year's events to really make it more integral to what we do. So, you look at it now, you think it's very, why haven't we done this before? I think we could talk about that a lot, but it's really key to what our mission is. And that's about people's health and well-being, and it fits perfectly. And that's why, I think as an organization, we have a focus and, actually some urgency about making some radical changes.
Okay, thank you. Les, any comments on that?
Yeah, and it ties directly into what Randy was just saying. It's the right thing to do. So when you think about it being the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do for our employees. It's the right thing to do for our patients, our members, our residents. It's the right thing to do for our community. And it just all comes together because we have to be reflective of all the areas that we do business in.
Okay. And I guess, in total, how good do you guys feel about, is it working the way you guys kind of expected it to work? And if you could give me some brief responses on that really quickly, please.
So from my perspective, I think it is. I think it's one of those where our employees have been really receptive in terms of the work that we're doing. And as Randy mentioned, we have a lot of things that are occurring in the space externally, but we are trying to do additional things to enhance our DE&I efforts internally that will enhance and go hand in hand with everything else that we're doing. So I think we are on the right track. I think we are doing the right things. I think our employees are being very receptive and providing a lot of feedback and raising their hand saying, hey, how can I be involved, or what can I help you guys with in terms of this journey?
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from either Randy or Greg on that point?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think what Les said was right on. We're making great progress. I think the challenge here sometimes is you always want to move faster and create urgency. But I think we're having, communication and dialogues and discussions we've never had before. We're being much more aware of racism. We're having a lot of great discussions that Greg could talk about. So we're making progress. I think it's just, as leaders, it's always a matter of creating the urgency to do more.
Okay. So in terms of that, kind of leads me right into the next section that we want to get into is it sounds like and feels like that you guys have done a great job of role modeling and building engagement within the organization and into your overall strategy. And so I'd love to hear more about something that I've heard about, and it's called Common Ground Series. So what is Common Ground Series? How did it get started? And where is it going? And I'd like to start with Greg on that one because he's been a central part of the dialogue between he and Randy. So Greg, you're up next, please.
Yeah, so the Common Ground series is really it's a conversation between me and Randy about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our backgrounds, race in America, Black Lives Matter. It started out because last year our employees were talking about all the issues that were occurring across our nation, and we weren't really leading them in that dialogue. And so we had a couple of incidents, and it was like, we should probably be leading out front. This is uncomfortable for a lot of people. Other people want to talk about it. So how do we model the behavior of what it looks like to have dialogue around conversations that we've not had before, and that there's a lot of, angst, anxiety, emotions around. And so went to Randy and said, hey, I got some questions from our employees, 10 questions. Why don't we hop on a video and just talk about it? And Randy said, yeah, let's do it. I said, we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter too. He said, yeah, let's do it. And so, I wanted us to have talked and had a conversation about the questions before we went on camera. We didn't have the opportunity to. And so really, this was a genuine and authentic conversation between Randy and myself, just talking about issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, our backgrounds growing up, getting to know one another a little bit more. And so what we've done is we've put that out to our entire organization. We've created a discussion guide around it, trying to embed it into a few different pathways of learning and development in the organization. So it turned out to be, a really great conversation and a tool that many of our people are responding to really favorably, actually.
Okay, very good. Randy?
Yeah, the credit goes to Greg. I think this was kind of some work that he had done with our staff. I think what was interesting, and it actually was a very, interesting discussion in that we were unscripted and we started with our backgrounds. Greg being from Cleveland in the city, diverse background. I'm an Iowa farm kid, a couple thousand people, all white community. And you couldn't find two different sort of backgrounds. And there we were sitting on a stage of an empty theater talking about, the issues in our lives. And I think what was interesting in as people who are responsible to lead an organization were just the responses we were getting back that Greg had kind of gotten from our staff. And, people not feeling free to, really voice the things that were in their heart, not being free to share their experiences, really concerned about, their ability to really take themselves to work. And, as people who work in organizations, these are, things that, frankly, in my career, I never heard of before. I, just assume people, if they've got concerns, they voice them, they're free to do and say the things. So it was really a great series. It was really, I think, really well received, not only for people whose voice hadn't been heard or thought they hadn't been heard or acknowledged, but I think just to, think about conversations that we were asking people to have in our organization, difficult conversations, awkward conversations. Sometimes you don't know the right words to say. And so I think Greg and I were, candid with each other, and we, expressed our concerns and fears. So, yeah, I think it was a really good opportunity to sit down and just kind of take kind of a state of where we were as an organization.
Wow. I have to imagine that created quite a bit of buzz out in the organization when you guys did that, especially coming from the different backgrounds that you guys have described. So what was the impact? I mean, once this video got out, what was the impact of the Common Ground video? And And I know Les is probably, he's kind of helicoptered up and he's, seeing all of the people related issues. So I'm curious, Les, as to how you saw it from your vantage point, and then I'll go back to Greg and Randy and ask them how they saw it from their vantage point.
Yeah, no, that series was a very impactful series for the organization. And people were talking about that for quite some time, whether it was, right immediately after the first one, people commenting, waiting, not being able to wait to see the other one, but it all resonated with people in some way or fashion, especially as you start to get into the different backgrounds and things like that. Now, that being said, there were a few comments around like talking about Black Lives Matter. Is that the right thing to talk about in the organization? But it is the right thing to bring up in an organization because that is something that was happening at that time in our communities. And so no one looked at it negatively. It really just generated a lot of good conversation, and you got to understand where people's points of view were in regards to should it be discussed, should it not be discussed. Wow, we're being really open and we're really sharing. So I think overall it was good for the organization.
And I have to say, before we go back to Greg and Randy, is that it was one of the most authentic conversations and dialogues that I've ever seen had between a CDO and a CEO. I mean, the authenticity of it, it felt like you just happened to be sitting in and watching a conversation between two people from different backgrounds. So I thought it was wonderful. So any other comments on this, Randy or Greg, that would add to what we've already talked about?
Yeah, the thing I would add is I was, you do a video like this, and then I was had a number of people like board members, other staff, mostly white, that said they shared it with their family, and so they sent it to their family, said, "Hey, listen to this. There's some insights here. We have to maybe rethink what we typically have thought in the past." And so, I think that's the power of doing things like this. It's, we called it common ground. And I think when we were talking, Greg and I we're talking about new ground as well, trying to establish some new dialogue. So I was very pleased to see a lot of people share it. And actually, a couple people mentioned they had family discussions using the videos.
Oh, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, to Randy and Les's point, I think that's why it's so powerful, Fred. People aren't used to having broadly these conversations in communities and across communities, particularly, within communities of color, it's discussed, but as Randy talked about, not as pervasively in other communities. And so to have people take it and grasp it and it resonate with them, I think we all were really excited about. And, being able to share it also outside of our organization. To Randy's point, we've got a lot of people who are like, wow, this is really helpful for me as an individual, for me as a leader, even to use within my organization. I think one of the other things is, we've got 50,000 people in our organization across, 28, 30 states or so. Even if we can say 15,000 people watched it, there are another 35,000 that may have only seen a piece or not, or any of it at all. And so, our ongoing work is really trying, again, to embed this within many of the things that we do across the organization so that more and more people can see it, use it, and leverage it to really create the kind of behaviors and culture that we want inside the organization.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you guys have done a fantastic job of at least getting today to the state that we're in now. So that there has to be a question in this somewhere. So the question is going to be, this is kind of where you are today. This is kind of how you got to where you are. So the question that I'm dying to ask is, what's the future going to look like?
As mentioned, we have Greg here. Greg is helping to lead the charge around this. We've built a strategy around this, And we are really on that march to continue. We're going to continue to leverage the things that we already have in place, like Common Ground Series, that has proven to be a place for us to reach a lot of people, to establish true conversations that may be tough in nature, but that need to be had. There's also the fact that we know we want our employees involved. So this is sort of just like the bottom or the tip of the iceberg that we are on this journey. And we know there's a lot more things that we can do internally with getting our employees involved, whether it's employee resource groups, whether it's more roundtables. We have started inclusion training, and there's a whole series built out around that. So it's not just a one and done, sometimes like you may hear in some of the news stories, but there's going to be a series around that. So we have this path that we're on. We're going to march down that path and take chunks out as we go to get this accomplished. But at the same time, as Randy mentioned, we also have the desire to move faster. So as we build this skill set and we start to get this even more deeply embedded in our DNA, we think that we will be able to move a lot faster than where we are today.
Thank you. Randy, Greg?
Yeah, I agree with Les. So what's in the future? It's all of that and more. There are a few topics that I feel like we've discussed and led on within our organization that I see people get so passionate about. And I think it's because everybody at the end of the day wants to be themselves. And when you feel like there are things that hinder you from being your most authentic self, contributing the most value, being able to really just create a better workplace and better services, people get passionate about figuring out ways to allow those things to actually ring true for more people on their teams and across the organization and those we serve. And so, I think we're going to continue to do more of the Common Ground series on different topics, whether it's with women, Latinx, whether it's with, our employees that identify the LGBTQ plus community. We'll talk about health equity, what those unfair and avoidable disparities in care and in community conditions look like, to begin to bring our people forward and how they understand it and how they're equipped to address it. We're talking about inclusive talent processes and how we improve those in the organization, inclusive marketplace, inclusive communities. And so, our appetite for change and for progress is really, really big. So we're going to begin to, take the work that we've done from a marketing and communication standpoint to really shape how culture is viewed and where we're going in our organization. And again, begin to embed that in a lot of the operational processes that we have today that we know we need to improve on.
Okay. Randy, any closing thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this is absolutely critical to who we are. We talk about our mission of health and well-being. And if that's our mission, we have, not done as well, as we could in this area. It starts clinically when, you see Black women that die 40% more than white women from breast cancer. When you see Black men who die twice, at twice the rate that white men. When you see Black babies dying at 4 times more than white babies, and mothers dying at about the same rate. That's all the clinical things that we've known for some time, and yet healthcare has not done the job that they could. And then when you talk about the work we've done with the social determinants, which are these social issues, the personal determinants, it fits right in. And so, for us not to think about DEI and all of that, then we're kidding ourselves that we're not living our mission. It's mission critical. We're doing all this other work that we believe is really around total health and well-being. And if we don't think about racism, and if we don't think about DE&I, then we're really not doing the work that we say we want to do relative to our mission. So I think, as you heard Les and Greg talk about, we've got a lot of things we need to do, a lot of things that we're working on, but more importantly, it's critical to our mission.
This is outstanding. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the other factors. You've done all of this work in the midst of a pandemic. And that in and of itself says to me everything that I need to hear about your commitment. So with that being said, Randy, Les, and Greg, I want to thank you so much for this. It was phenomenal. Appreciate it. And continue the great work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Fred.
Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Greg.